The film begins in Chinatown with a struggling inventor looking to sell his creations. He's taken by a boy into an antique store where Rand attempts to sell the owner on his Swiss Army device for the bathroom. Mr. Wing's not interested, but Rand is suddenly distracted by a strange unseen creature, and since he's also searching for a Christmas present for his son, he offers the man $200 for it. The elderly shopkeeper refuses to sell it, but his grandson, knowing that their family's hard up for money, sneaks it to the stranger without his grandfather's consent. Rand's informed of 3 important rules to follow to take care of the creature, but isn't told the details. He takes it back to his small town of Kingston Falls, which is currently in an economic downfall with most of its townspeople out of work. His son Billy's struggling to get his car started to get to work due to the cold, and as Mr. Futterman express his distrust of foreign brands as he lost his job to a large manufacturer. Only being a small town, Billy's able to run down the road to the bank where he works as a teller, and brings his dog Barney with him. He's attracted to his co-worker Kate, who warns Billy about the mean-spirited Mrs. Deagle swiftly approaching. She tells Billy that Barney destroyed her snowman and claims that if she catches him, she's going to put him in her spin dryer on high heat. Hearing these threats, Barney leaps up and begins justifiably attacking Mrs. Deagle, but is held back by Bill. Somehow the bank manager allows Billy to keep his job while the wicked woman switches from her threats to playing the victim in an instant. Billy gets home late, knocking a sword off the wall, and is greeted by his mother Lynn making dinner. When his father finally gets back from Chinatown, he does the same thing with the sword on his way in. He gives Billy his Christmas present early, which he's allowed to open since it's breathing and could die otherwise. A small creature exits the box called a mogwai that his father's named Gizmo and can drive a stick. The first rule the boy told him is that it's terrified of bright lights and can die from exposure to it. The second rule's that it must never get wet. And thirdly, and most importantly, is that they must never feed it after midnight, though he never said why. Gizmo shows a high level of intelligence and enjoys music, but bumps his head when frightened by a reflection, so Billy bandages it before bed. The next day, while Billy struggles with one of his father's inventions, a young Christmas tree named Pete stops by the house. He's introduced to Gizmo and the two seem to get along, but while discussing its possible origins, he accidentally knocks a glass of water on him and the mogwai begins to go into convulsions. 5 tiny furballs spring out of his back and begin to grow into 5 mogwai, just like Gizmo, who isn't happy about it. Billy informs his father, who's in the middle of working on one of his inventions that they can duplicate, and he begins to think of schemes to make money. During the night, Billy finds Barney hanging from the Christmas lights in the cold, which he suspects to be the result of Mrs. Deagle but doesn't have any proof. Billy soon discovers that the new mogwai have individual personalities much different from Gizmo's overtly friendly nature. The new batch is more destructive and is led by a white mohawk adorner that Billy names Stripe, who snaps at him when getting too close. The next day, Billy takes 2 of the mogwai to the school and has his science teacher Mr. Hanson examine them. Fascinated, he asks to keep one in the lab for further study, where he makes an enemy of it by taking a blood sample. Billy stops by the bar to meet Kate, but she's moving a drunk Mr. Futterman onto the sidewalk. He has a conspiracy theory that creatures called Gremlins were used by the enemy during the Second World War, and is convinced by Kate that maybe he should walk home instead of driving his tractor. Billy walks Kate home and learns that she dislikes Christmas, but she doesn't say why. When they reach it, Billy musters up the courage to ask her out, which she accepts before packing it in for the night. That night, Billy gives the creatures some chicken, which they devour instantly, but Gizmo refuses to eat it. At the school, Mr. Hanson's performing tests on the creature until it eventually swipes his sandwich left on the counter. The next day, Rand's left for an inventors conference and taken Barney when Billy discovers all of the creatures have transformed into grotesque cocoons, and notices the clock still displays the same time he fed them and was purposely sabotaged to appear before midnight. On Christmas Eve, Rand calls the house and intends to make it home before Christmas Day, as the other inventors are far better than him and he's intimidated. At school, the creature in the cage created a cocoon of its own, which the science teacher calls the mogwai, going through its pupal stage. During class, it begins hatching, along with all of the ones at Billy's house while he's busy at work dealing with Mrs. Deagle again. When class gets out, Mr. Hanson wishes his students a Merry Christmas, then finds the cocoon empty with the creature missing. He calls Billy at the bank, who's just getting off work, and races to the school to investigate. While Hanson's looking for the runaway mogwai, he's suddenly attacked and found dead by Billy with a needle in the buttocks. Billy reaches for the phone, but a creature scratches him before stealing the teacher's apple and disappearing into the ventilation. When Billy goes to the medical room, he sees the mogwai for the first time in its hairless reptilian form, result of the midnight munchies. At home, the creatures have begun torturing Gizmo while Lynn goes to investigate the sounds. She finds the 5 hatched cocoons and warns Billy, but one of the intelligent creatures disconnects the phone line. Finding them making a mess of the kitchen, Lynn switches on the blender, killing the one eating out of it. She then stabs one to death, and uses cooking spray to force another into the microwave. After it pops, she finds the fourth hiding in the Christmas tree, but it begins strangling her with the tinsel while Stripe watches. Arriving home to the chaos, Billy grabs a sword and decapitates his mother's attacker, leaving only Stripe, who escapes out a window and into the city. Billy takes his mother to the neighbor's house before finding Gizmo discarded in the laundry chute. They go searching for Stripe together and track him down to the community center, but he takes another swipe at Billy when he enters and leaps into the pool. He begins multiplying at an exponential rate, creating hundreds of creatures all similar in nature. Using Futterman's tractor, they demolish his house and run him and his wife over, who calls them Gremlins just before he's crushed. Billy races to the police station and tells Sheriff Frank and his deputy Brent, but the two think he's just a drunk. The Gremlins spread out all over Kingston Falls, destroying the infrastructure and attacking its people. After seeing how friendly Gizmo is, the cops begin receiving calls about Gremlins and assume they can handle it. The creatures pose as Christmas carolers to torment Mrs. Deagle, then tamper with her stair lift, causing it to launch her out a window and kill her. The officers witness Santa being mauled by half a dozen Gremlins while having their brakes disabled, resulting in them flipping when building up speed. In a Christmas miracle, Billy gets his car started and drives to the bar to check on Kate. She's currently being held hostage by the Gremlins and being forced to serve them while they destroy the place in celebration. They enjoy their time as much as any humans would, playing cards, dancing, and even developing female and cool guy personas. Kate notices they're scared of her matches, so she begins taking photos, knocking them away with the flash. While attempting to escape, she gets mugged by a Gremlin that's turned to a life of crime, but after missing its shot, it's forced to flee when Billy's headlights blind it. Kate makes it to the car, but this time it doesn't start, so they're forced to take shelter inside the destroyed bank. In an explanation as to why Kate dislikes Christmas, she says that her father disappeared on Christmas Eve when she was a child. Several days later, he was found dead in the chimney dressed as Santa, having slipped, broken his neck, and got stuck on Christmas Day in an attempt to surprise Kate. They notice the town's gone quiet, and find the Gremlins holed up inside the cinema watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They seem to all be having a good time except for Stripe, who steps out for some snacks across the road. Billy and Kate decide to turn on the gas and set a fire in the basement to destroy the creatures all at once. On their way out, they're spotted behind the screen and chased by the horde of Gremlins, but just manage to escape through a back door and barricade it. When they reach a safe distance, the movie theater explodes and Stripe witnesses all of his offspring obliterated. Billy and Kate see the Gremlin leader and break into the store to go after him. They finally kiss for the first time before splitting up, where Billy takes a baseball bat and goes looking for Stripe alone. The creature begins terrorizing Billy and launching saw blades at him, firing baseballs with a launcher, and all while maintaining distance with a tricycle. Eventually, Stripe uses a crossbow, hitting Billy in the arm, but he deflects the second shot with a radio and throws it at him. But the Gremlin leader re-emerges with a chainsaw and rushes Billy. Kate and Gizmo go to a control room and start looking for the light switch, but accidentally activate a fountain in the garden section. While Billy uses the bat to defend himself, Kate saves him by activating the store lights, blinding Stripe, who's carried away to safety by his chainsaw. Right over to the gardening section, coincidentally by the firearms. Gizmo disappears from the control room and begins roaming the store atop a toy car. It's now Christmas morning and Rand's getting back to town with Barney, who takes off into the broken store window, sensing the danger. He meets up with Gizmo and they go searching for Billy, who's located Stripe by the water fountain and begins to get shot at. As Stripe begins to multiply again, Gizmo comes driving his toy car full speed up a ramp but misses Stripe completely and crashes into the hedges. A little beaten up, he manages to open a skylight, letting in the morning sun directly onto Stripe and causing him to slowly melt away. Billy walks over to check out the fountain when Stripe's skeleton leaps out at him for one last scare, but melts away to Barney's confusion. That night, the family watched the news covering up the disaster by claiming the town of Kingston Falls to be suffering a mass hysteria. While nurturing Gizmo back to health, the family are confronted by Mr. Wing, who's come to collect his stolen property. He hears the mention of little green men on the news but is more disgusted that they've taught Gizmo to watch TV. For the first time in the film, Billy's able to understand Gizmo, who tells him goodbye on their way out. Wing tells Billy that one day he may become the Mogwai's caretaker, then receives a smokeless ashtray as a present from the wacky inventor. As Gizmo and Wing walk away into a painting, Rand reminds us that before you ever need to call a handyman, make sure to check your closet first, because there just may be a gremlin in it. And the movie ends.